It's another fine day at Camp Dynasty. I am Counselor Austin, joined by Counselor Collin. And I got to tell you right now, the excitement, the energy, the juice around here right now, it couldn't be higher because we're coming off of summer scouting running backs. If you haven't checked that out, make sure you do because this running back class is very, very interesting. But Collin, I could tell you the same damn thing about the wide receiver group this year, and that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, the wide receiver group this year is going to be interesting to watch through the season, but it's going to be interesting because it feels like it's kind of flipped from last year, where last year it was heavy running back, and it was like, Bijan, Gibbs, and then your pick of the litter who you liked in the bottom of the first round. This year, I think it's going to be the wide receivers shining, and that's going to be, the belle of the ball. The prize that you're looking at is, Mr. 101 this year could be a wide receiver.
Could just be. I think we're going to talk about him today. But outside of that player, I asked you this last week about running backs. This wide receiver group, as a whole, right now, based on what you've watched, what do you think about it?
I think that it's going to be, in my opinion, it's one guy at the top, and then there's a tier of two that's really good, and then there's like a lot of guys, a lot of names that I'm going to be sitting here, picking and seeing how much I can see this season and if they can differentiate themselves. So last week we talked about the running backs, and we're like, and I was saying there's this cluster at the top, and we'll see if one can rise to the number one and be the number one running back alone. In this one, I don't think anybody else is taking the number one spot, but I think there's a lot of movement to be had, 2 through 5, but especially 3 through 5.
Yeah, I'm very curious to find out because it seems like we saw the class as a whole in a very similar way, but I am curious if we have the same players in those spots because there are so many names this year. I mean, I think even just like last year, we saw a lot of guys kind of emerge through the season and it kind of turned it into a little bit of a deep wide receiver class. The top end was, questionable maybe in I think it's fair to say. This year, you have an undeniable talent at the top. And then, like you said, you're following that up with some really, really good players, like guys that have potential to be better than those guys we were talking about last year, the Quentin Johnsons of the world. After that, man, it just completely opened up for me. And I was watching, wide receivers number 6, 7, 8, 9, I'm going all the way down. And they just kept impressing me. And I think there is definitely a scenario where you're going to see this year where guys are going to be battling to get into this top 5 sort of range because it's not very defined on the bottom end.
It's good. There's all these guys have like parts of their game that pop. Like, you'll be like, oh man, this guy is really good at this, and it feels like they're all like, I don't know if like specialists is the right word, but it feels like trying to rank them. You and I were discussing before. We're like, number 5 is a question, is a iffy spot because it's like there's so many guys and they're all good at certain things, certain parts of the game. And it's just like, what do you value? What do you think is going to happen? What are you expecting? And so I think that's going to be interesting to parse once we get to that number 5 ranking.
Well, speak of the devil, because it's time. You just said you had a lot of trouble with number 5. I had a lot of trouble with number 5 as well. So let me have it. Who is your number 5 wide receiver in this class?
My number 5 wide receiver, I'm deciding right now between 3 guys. And we'll talk about the other 2 once we get to honorable mentions or if you have them in your rankings. But Mario Williams is my number 5. The slot out of USC. Man, I was pleasantly surprised every time he touches the ball. Like, you're watching USC last year, obviously for the Caleb Williams experience. You'll be watching USC this year for the Caleb Williams experience, and just number 4 with the ball in his hands is electric. So I just, there's other guys that are fun too, that do other things in their own rights, but I think that this is one of the more, exciting small guys in this class, because there's not a lot of, we've been having a few classes where we have, smaller stature receivers, like aplenty. And this class is not quite that, but at 5'9", 185, this is like a slot receiver. This guy's built like a slot receiver, and he plays like a slot receiver. He gets those manufactured touches on screen passes, on jet sweeps, on handoffs, stuff like that. And then he also, plays hard and strong over the middle of the field. He can make people miss after the catch, and he has some long speed also. He can go outside, play the Z every once in a while, and go do that kind of stuff on the outside. So beating people vertical is a part of his game. Lily's got some things to say about Mario Williams, if you can hear her in the background barking. She can't wait to watch Caleb Williams either. So, but we're looking at a guy that is small in stature, but has a big impact on the game.
So here's where we talk about the depth of this class, because I honestly didn't even watch Mario Williams.
Oh boy, here we go.
I'm telling you, I watched 11 players and he wasn't one of them. So I obviously remember this player from last year.
Yeah.
It's a guy on my list to get to eventually, but honestly, I looked at the size and I thought I'll get to you a little bit later. But man, dynamic. That's a trait that I remember from this player. So I'm very excited to go back, hearing that he is your number 5 player in this class. I'm very excited to go back and check him out.
Yeah, you know my type. You know what kind of guy I like, and so when you can separate and you can go after the catch, and that's like you got a little soft spot in my heart.
Man, I am shocked that there was a player on your list that I didn't watch. I felt like I had it covered, but all right. Mario Williams, number 5. My number 5. This was very difficult for me to pick a player here. There were, I did narrow it down to 2 guys, and I picked between those 2. And the player that I went with at number 5 is Troy Franklin from Oregon.
Okay.
Are we on the same? Have you checked out Troy Franklin?
I didn't get a chance to check out Troy Franklin. So here we go.
Okay. Well, then it's perfect. You have Mario Williams. I have Troy Franklin, 2 Pac-12 receivers, which, by the way, common theme among the names this year. There are a lot of exciting players, wide receivers in the Pac-12 this year. A lot of guys that are very intriguing. Troy Franklin is a player that you talk about, a guy with a premier recruiting background. He's a 4-star player. He was wide receiver 3 in this 2021 class that we're going to be referencing probably a few times on this episode. So he comes in with this pedigree. He's a tall player, 6'3". He's listed at 6'3", 178. Okay.
115.
Yeah. Like, he is, it's a very interesting build. And that's honestly my main concern with him, is that the size for the type of receiver that he is, the strength, the mass, it's not there. It's not ideal. Why am I putting him at number 5 though? Because this is summer and this is the time to take shots. And I think that this player, by the end of this year, could be in a bit of a different conversation. If we see some physical growth out of him, if we can get to a point where, come next spring, he's weighing in around, 190, at least 190, that would be great, because he has all the makings of your prototypical X player. Despite, being a rail thin sort of a build, man, this guy can go up and grab it on vertical routes. And he is a vertical winner as well. So he threatens vertically with his speed. You see him routinely take the top off for Oregon. But if he's running, a fade or a dig or something where he has to get a little dirty, this guy's going up and grabbing it. And he only had 11 contested opportunities this year, but he brought in 7 of them. So it's almost an area of his game that's not quite, it's not he's not like Drake London, or he's not like, any of these guys that are going up 40 times in a year, bringing down 28 of them. But he can do it at that sort of a clip. And yeah, I was just really impressed with his height and his speed. He's not an explosive player, and that's another thing that I think could hold him back. He's not an explosive athlete. Like I said, he does show an ability to win deep with his release at the line of scrimmage, but you're not talking about a guy that has a lot of juice, and he's not a great open field player. He can do a little bit of something in the open field, but it's certainly not his forte. So basically, Troy Franklin is a kind of a project, and I'd like to see a lot of growth out of him this year to earn this spot.
Yeah, doing a little refreshing on Troy here. And Oregon, well known for beefing up their skill players. The long history of them doing that.
Come on.
No, but I mean, a 6'3" possession receiver that can win at the catch point, that has, solid footwork, wins on the sideline, is all, the thinness doesn't actually matter to me. I mean, like, breaking some tackles would be cool. That's what the thickness can help you with. Also preventing injuries, that kind of stuff. But when it comes to being a receiver, it's more and more acceptable to be skinny because the rules support you not getting hit. So at the end of the day, the thinness, it matters, but it matters a lot less than it once did. So, yeah, this will be a player that's sitting on my watch list for sure for the upcoming season, because Bo Nix is apparently up there on some people's lists, and I got to see what that's all about. So I'm gonna have to pin my eyelids back to watch an Oregon game and see Bo Nix throwing ducks to Troy Franklin.
I mean, yeah, that's a team, man. Though you got a quarterback, maybe you got a nice little running back, maybe 2, and you got a guy like Troy Franklin as a wide receiver. I mean, this team profiles as an exciting offense for sure. Exciting
on
group.
Paper.
Yeah, on paper, and we'll see. All right.
Okay.
Let's get into the top 4. I'm hoping
we'll see.
We gotta have some. Give me your number 4 wide receiver.
My number 4 wide receiver is Malik Nabers out of LSU. He is, so we went into last year, right? Let's wind back the clocks. And we're talking about Kayshawn. Talking about the number 1 receiver, the, athletic run after the catch player for LSU. He's, donning the number 7. He's the guy. Well, Malik Nabers was better than him last year, and it wasn't really close. I mean, Kayshawn was pretty bad. So now we're going to talk about an LSU receiver who's coming in. He's great after the catch. He's physically gifted. He's a good route runner. I mean, he's 6 foot 195. He's, the nice prototype wide receiver size. It's not quite like the X. He doesn't have that tall, that height. But this will be Jaden Daniels' number 1 receiver this year. And he showed up against Georgia, which not a lot of players do against that shutdown defense, which I like a lot because, like, it's easy to see, like, 129 yards against UAB and be like, oh, cool. But when you actually go and you do it against Georgia and you're beating up on NFL corners, that's when it really matters. And that was in, a conference championship game on top of it. So that was nice to see. And so Nabers, he's a fun, athletic receiver that is from a pedigree school that has solid coaching. So hopefully the coaching looks better this year. But he showed it last year with the same quarterback, develop a little bit of a rapport and improve on that.
Malik Nabers is my wide receiver 4.
All right.
And honestly, if you were to just have said all of those things without saying the name, Kayshawn.
I know. I know.
He profiles very similarly to Kayshawn last year, but he stole the show from Kayshawn last year. Every time you sat down to watch LSU, you kept seeing number 8 instead of number 7. And that became a running theme that then progressed as the season went on. And the most exciting part of Malik Nabers is how good he was to end the season. You're talking about the UAB game, the Georgia game, starting with that UAB game in week 12. I mean, he just exploded and he became much more of a down the field threat for them. Early in the season, it was a lot of short work, a lot of curls, digs, quick little hitters from him. But I think as the season went on, they started to, put more and more in his hands. And that turned into big plays down the field and manufactured touches that turned into big plays. This guy was making insane plays by the end of the year. And the last 2 games, he finished with 291 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an 18.5 ADOT. So he was a weapon, and that was the Georgia game and the bowl game against Purdue. So, I mean, the sky really feels like the limit for this player. He comes in at 4 because I think they're, despite having 1,000 yards last year, you'd like to see him kind of own it for the whole year. But man, electric player, really fun player. And a guy that I am very excited to watch this season.
So what makes him different as a prospect from Kayshawn? Because I sat there and described him as a similar player.
Right.
And so you tell me what you think. I'll tell you if there's anything that you missed that I think.
Well, first and foremost, his hands are much better. And honestly, it's a player that cleaned up a bit of a drop issue of his own as a freshman. Coming in, he had 47 targets and 6 drops, and he improved that to 4 drops on 100 targets last year. So
like worlds of improvement.
Yeah, 4% from, I think it was like 9% or something. Like big time improvement with his hands, and you can tell. Another thing I really like about Nabers compared to Kayshawn is just his consistency from route to route. Kayshawn was almost like taking plays off, it felt like. Nabers is just go. He's running crisp routes all the time. He's winning consistently, and he's making plays consistently, and that's just not something at all that we saw from Kayshawn last year.
That's exactly what jumped off for me. It's like every single route starts off exactly the same, which is just ideal wide receiver work right there. And he is setting them up, stemming them, and then breaking it off. And that is the biggest difference between him and Kayshawn for me, is the consistency in crisp, clean route running. I mean, it's not like spectacular route running, but it is, like you said, like it is consistent. It's always like on time. and all of that. And Kayshawn, despite the physical tools, that's, you got to get open, man.
Well, and that's the thing too. Like when we talked about Kayshawn last year at this time, it was like we haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen it yet. We're waiting
exactly.
for it. Nabers already has 1,000-yard season to his name. He has put that on film already. So you know what you're getting with this type of a player, and it's going to be the Nabers show for LSU this year. Like you're going to see more of this ideally, and that will make him a top wide receiver in this class, no doubt about it, because of the traits that he possesses. And one thing I do want to talk about too, yak potential. This guy's got really fun yak ability, and it didn't really show up early in the season because he wasn't getting those sorts of touches. He wasn't running those routes that allowed him to get additional yardage for the most part. But like I said,
a lot of sit down routes.
Yes,
it's just like
exactly.
A lot of short, just get it and get down.
Yep, exactly. And as the season went on, they were getting him into space. They were letting him work, and it culminates into that bowl game against Purdue where he has 118 yards after the catch. He's taken, pop pass for like 60 yards, and he's making plays over the middle. And so I think it's going to be an even better and more exciting season from Nabers from start to finish. And that's going to, number 4 feels like it could be the floor for him in this class.
Yeah. And in that Purdue game, he also completed 2 passes when one was a touchdown. And he also had a long rushing touchdown. I was trying to pull up the stat. It might have been a touch pass.
I think it was the pop pass, probably.
Yeah.
That was the big play. Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking it was a handoff, but yeah, it must have been one of those. So yeah, Nabers has some room that he could jump up, and that's kind of what I was talking about with this cluster on the back end. Is he very well could jump a couple of the guys that are ahead of him.
All right. Number 4, Malik Nabers, all around.
Yep.
Can we keep it rolling? Wide receiver 3 in this class.
All right. I learned how to pronounce this player's last name today. It's Rome Odunze. It's not Romo Duns, even though Romo Duns rolls off the tongue really easy.
Odunze is kind of fun though.
Odunze is a lot more fun, and it's a lot. I'm kind of thinking the announcers are gaslighting me because it's a lot more fun to say on the broadcast when you get a big play.
Odunze.
Odunze. But this has been a crush of mine for since last year. I wanted him to come out last year in the 23 class. He was going to be maybe my wide receiver 3, maybe my wide receiver 2. But he's coming out in 2024 class, and him being number 3 says something about this 2024 class for me. Because these next 2 guys are pretty good. But Odunze is no slouch. He is a complete receiver. Where do you have him before I go on?
I just want to let you know that Odunze is my number 3 receiver as well. I was expecting to come into the show and you were going to have Odunze at number 2.
I was.
And I was going to have to spill my heart for my number 2 in this class, but I think we're probably on the same page.
I think we're good. Yeah. Well, I don't think either of us left the next 2 guys off our list. So
yeah, right.
Yeah. So our top 4 is
okay. Well, we'll get there. Odunze though,
complete receiver. He is a complete receiver. He's okay. I said last year reminds me of Jahan Dotson, and I'll maintain that because he's bigger, obviously, but the play style is the same. He's 6'3", 201. So maybe not, obviously, if you're coming into this, fresh with the 2024 class.
Everybody
For me,
knows Odunze. Come on.
Obviously. Yeah. Everybody's watching Washington. But Rome is 6'3", 201. And he plays like John, where he's got the crisp, clean routes, and then he also wins over the top of people. So that the run after the catch isn't spectacular. It's pretty good, but it's mostly making people miss. It's not a lot of tackle breaking, but he is going to be the high volume target for this Michael Penix, pass heavy spread offense in Washington next year, while Penix tries to go win a Heisman after being a Heisman finalist last year. So I like this player a lot. I wanted him to be higher. I couldn't do it, but number 3 is a damn good spot in this class.
It is. I mean, this top end, starting with Nabers, I think number 5 becomes a big cluster. You could pick a handful of names there. For me, Nabers was solid number 4, and everything above that was like, wow, yeah, we're talking about some really talented players in this class. Odunze, same sort of a trajectory here. We talked about him a little bit last year leading up to the draft, wondering, is he going to declare? He was going to be pretty high on our wide receiver rankings if he would have declared last year. And he's still here at number 3. A little bit of a background on him. He's a 4-star from 2020. But he's got a track background. He was a standout sprinter in high school, and that is something that shows up big time on his film because, like you said, this is a big-bodied player. You could easily envision him playing the X because of his down the field ability and his ability to play on the sideline and go over the top of people. But they played him a lot at the Z as well because he's so versatile and he can they get those touches where he's kind of the motion man and they're getting him into spaces to use him because he's an athlete. He is an impressive athlete. And like you said, the run after the catch stuff isn't spectacular. It's not, wow, he's a big dude that can do that. He's not Quentin Johnston in that regard, but he's got a little bit of polish in that area. He's got a little bit of something that he shows you with the ball in his hands. This is a player that had 1,100 yards last year with 7 touchdowns. A premier season for a wide receiver. And yeah, I was expecting to be impressed. I definitely was. In terms of the question marks with him, I have 2 things. Number 1, the route tree is pretty limited right now. And I think it's a product of this offense, but really, you don't see any in-breaking routes from Odunze, like at all. Like it's like comeback or a dig route, or I'm going long, or I'm hitting you with the double move that I set up because I just ran 4 dig routes and now I'm going to go on a post. So it's a little bit limited. I don't think. Like there are things that show up, like he runs the little whip route on the goal line in one of the games where you're like, oh damn, that's a big dude doing that. That's kind of crazy. There might be some untapped potential with him, but you just don't see it on film. So that's one thing that I had to point out.
Whip routes are fake.
I know they're fake, but when a big dude runs one and cooks the guy, you're kind of like, okay, like I'll give you that.
Odunze had 7 catches over the intermediate middle of the field, which is very few. Yeah. He had 98 of his yards came over the middle of the field. That is almost unheard of for a player with 1,100 yards. Like that's just crazy. So, it is pretty spread out. There a lot of it's over the short middle, and most of it's on the left side, which is not surprising if you take a look at what he's doing. Like you said, a lot of goes and a lot of comebacks, and most of the time he's lined up in that left X position. So you see those kind of things, and it is absolutely a product of it. But being that as it is, you can't really scout it. Like, it's not like you can sit here and say, oh yeah, no, it's fine. Like, I'm confident he can run a corner on the right side of the field. It's like, well, you've never seen it because he has 0 catches on the deep right side of the field. Like, 0 targets on the deep right side of the field. He just doesn't do it. So as much as you say, like, yeah, no, as much as I say, yeah, he's out there, he runs good routes, it's crisp, it's clean, he's got great hands. That's just the routes he runs. The routes he doesn't run, I got no clue. I'm assuming at that point. And you know what they say about assuming.
Yeah.
So and
yeah.
maybe my guy Rome makes me look not so good on that part, but with the work that he does in the short game and how trustworthy he is, I think he'll be just a very good possession receiver that has the upside of winning vertically over the top of DBs.
Well, and that's another interesting part of his game, because he shows you an ability to go up and grab it. You know, he's a hands catcher. He's extending 4 for 16 uncontested targets.
That's surprising.
It's a shocking number because, like, when you watch, like, just to put on like a highlight film, you're like, oh damn, this guy's like a big, you know, contested catch winner, that type of a player. The numbers don't exactly back that up. I'm curious, like, obviously I didn't watch every game of Odunze from last year, so like I don't know where those catches are coming or where those targets are coming on the field. But it's something I'll be watching closer this year to see if he can improve on that number and show you a little bit more in that department, because I mean, it seems like he has the tools to be that sort of a player, which is just a big positive for a guy like this. So yeah, that was the only other thing that caught my eye.
And you mentioned the yards after catch. We both mentioned the yards after catch, but specifically, he only had 340 yards after catch.
Yeah.
Out of almost 1,200 yards. So that's also pretty surprising to see that, like, 3/4 of his yards are coming off of his own creation, off of his own just straight up wide receiver routes. Whatever he's doing is all the yards he's getting. So
there's a lot of guys like that in this class, though. But that being said, like even a guy like Nabers, where it's like you don't see the big number. Like the yak isn't like a big number, but it's like, oh, he can do some stuff after the catch. I felt similarly about Odunze, not obviously to that same level as a guy like Nabers, but like I think the number is not exactly reflective of his potential after the catch. But that being said, it would like to see that number improve this season just to kind of solidify that.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Nabers, and he's like 40% of his yards are after the catch. So I mean, in comparison, it's like you can see there is something there, but again, is it more scheme? Is it so that's Odunze is a interesting player that we're gonna have to keep a closer eye on, because the numbers don't quite match up to what I'm looking at, and so it'll be interesting to see how this year goes.
Let me talk to you about my number 2 wide receiver in this class. How about that?
Let's do it.
I got to tell you, man, Ohio State cannot keep getting away with this because I don't get it.
I don't either.
I try to go into this process like no bias, like put your thoughts to the side, watch the film. I still went into Emeka Egbuka thinking, this will probably be like bottom of my wide receivers, my top 5. Like, he seemed like that sort of a player. Unbelievable player. Unbelievable player. I mean, start with the background here. It shouldn't come as a surprise maybe, because 5-star recruit, 9th overall player in this 2021 class. Our number one wide receiver was also in that class, and he was much further down this list. And Egbuka was coming in as the premier wide receiver recruit for Ohio State of that class. He's going to be overshadowed this year because of the hype around number one, but this guy deserves some serious praise. He is a real talent at the wide receiver position.
I remember the beginning of the 2022 season, and we're going in and watching Ohio State mostly for CJ Stroud, and then also obviously for our number one guy, and then Travion Henderson, who we talked about, Jackson obviously was a big name that we're keeping an eye on. Jackson goes down, and number two is just doing his thing. I'm like, hey, CJ, let's why are we not, now that Jackson's down, why are we not featuring 18 more? I want to see you throw it to 18. Number two, getting the ball, making plays, game after game after game, and then it just like becomes a real thing. It's no longer like the handcuff running back that comes in and it's like, oh yeah, he's kind of had a few games and then went away. This guy comes in for Jackson after he gets injured, mans the slot role, all year, and dominates. Like, I was so shocked that they did it again with another receiver. Like, like you said, you can't keep getting away with this Brian Hartline. Where are you? I don't understand.
I mean, it's gonna be 100%. It's gonna be another Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave situation. Like, these guys are both going like top 15.
Top 15. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, Egbuka is like, there's like shades of Jackson in his game. And he was just like, Jackson goes down and you're thinking like, what does this mean? And they just didn't miss a beat with these two guys. I mean, and honestly for them, it was a great thing. Like, yeah. Jackson still made his money. He was still a first round pick. Everything went okay for him. And these two guys got to show off all season long instead of, Jackson taking, 1,100 of these yards. It was Egbuka that had 74 catches, 1,151 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Like, he had his opportunity to show what he was made out of. I mean, savvy slot player with an ability to play out wide. I mean, he's not limited to the slot at all. He's 6'1", 205. He can win from anywhere on the field, basically. Exceptionally nuanced route runner already. I mean, man, the way that this guy moves his upper body and his head and everything about the way that he sets up his routes, it's already advanced. It's JSN-esque with the way that he runs routes from the slot. Deadly player in the short and intermediate areas. And I feel like I said the same thing last year about Jackson. Yak potential, this guy's got it too. 7.1 yards per reception after the catch in 2022. Crafty athlete in the open field. I mean, I was blown away by Egbuka.
Yeah. I was also blown away. Like, there was a route that he ran where I'm fairly certain it was a fake screen to Marvin Harrison on the left side. And Egbuka goes and he like starts the route and then he slows it down like he's going to go like stock block. And then he just breaks it off. He's going full speed and he gets the slant. And it's like, Jesus Christ, like, oh my God. And I like some of the plays, like, we can compare him to Jackson since we know exactly what both of them look like in this role. And I mean, Egbuka might not be as technically sound as Jackson, but from what he doesn't have in that, he makes up for with athleticism in bunches. Like, we talked about how Jackson was this technician out of the slot that's going to be wide open, great hands, takes hits over the middle, all that. Egbuka, I mean, man, gets the ball in his hands and goes. Like the extra gear that Egbuka has is unreal. So he can take the top off, and he can work over the middle, and he can, take the screen passes and the touch passes and the handoffs. Like, this is a very versatile player. There's not really many holes that I noticed in the game. I mean, he's not necessarily a vertical threat.
Yeah.
He's not like a sideline possession receiver, but somebody else has that covered.
Right. That was the only thing I noticed as well. I mean, I think certainly athletic. The athleticism box is checked. The vertical speed, I don't know if it's entirely there. Like what do you think? What do you think he is? You think he's 4.4s?
I'd say low 4.4. If I feel like it's similar to like Addison at Pitt, and he ran a 4.44. So I don't think he's like a ton faster than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's fine, right? Like that's one of those narratives that gets really worked with guys like this, because it's like the one thing you can point at. I mean, Christ, we did it with Jackson last year. Like he doesn't need that at all. Like his release technique and everything, like he gains separation so easily, and he doesn't need the speed, and he can't, when he's in the open field, like he makes plays just like Jackson did. He doesn't need 4.3 low 4.4 speed to make those plays after the catch. So but that was really the only thing that like stood out to me from watching him. He felt like a very complete player already.
Yeah, I feel like he eliminates angles like with his acceleration.
Yeah.
More than, because like maybe the top speed isn't as fast as like Xavier Worthy, who we'll talk about later, and he's like the deep threat of this class for me. Maybe the long speed isn't there, but the 0 to 60 is really, really nice.
Yep.
So going from like a little slant route to, turning, finding wherever that safety's bearing down or the linebacker and just going, that is really nice. And it's just, I mean, out of a slot guy that can play outside, it's all turn up sunshine and roses for me.
Yep. So, I mean, this is a premier talent, and he's not even the best wide receiver on his own team, because that honor belongs to Marvin Harrison Jr., the chosen one of this draft class. I mean, it is nice. I have to say, it's very nice for a change to have a wide receiver in this position, because it just feels like it's been a long time since we've had a wide receiver prospect like this. That was a no-doubter. You can go back to Jamar Chase. That was probably the last player that was in this sort of a realm. But even then,
he was a doubter.
There were, there
were doubts. I mean, he didn't play for a year.
Right.
So that's where the question mark
sits for a year. Everybody creates these narratives. Marvin Harrison Jr., though, is coming into this season of college football with the highest expectations that I can remember for a wide receiver playing football in his final draft eligible season, because you're talking about a player here that's already being discussed as a potential top 5 draft pick as a wide receiver. Is that justified? What did you see on film, Collin?
Yeah. Take him number 3, damn it. I mean, after you get past, so the chosen one of this draft class is Caleb Williams.
Yeah, for the NFL, certainly.
But for fantasy, this is your guy. Yeah. This is your guy, man. This is who you're tanking for. I mean, if you have that 101 and you're not in a super flex league, here he is. So, man, Marvin is special. This is the X wide receiver prototype, period. if you built a wide receiver in a lab, this is what comes out. 6'3", 205 pounds. I mean, obviously you got the genetics. Marvin Harrison, you can't get past that, where Marvin Harrison is one of the best receivers, he top 20 receiver all time, let's
Hall
say.
of Famer.
Yeah. So he's got that going for him. Then he's got Brian Hartline in his corner. That doesn't hurt, because apparently that guy just turns out not just NFL receivers, but elite receivers in the NFL year after year. And then you got the production, where he outproduces everybody last year. 1,263 yards, 14 touchdowns. I mean, if you can find a hole in Marvin Harrison's game, because that's the only thing I can do right now, is doesn't do much after the catch. That's it. Everything else he does is spectacular. The route running is ridiculous for a guy that's as big as he is. The contested catch is unreal. The footwork around the sideline makes me sick to my stomach. There are very few flaws in Marvin Harrison's game. So, I mean, if you want to take him as high, I mean, Ja'Marr Chase has completely blown games wide open, and nobody will ever talk about he got drafted too high. That narrative is dead. So if Marvin's doing what he's doing now in the NFL, take him as high as you want.
I mean, we've seen how much the wide receiver position impacts teams in today's NFL. I mean, you still have teams that are reluctant to pay these guys, and yet you keep seeing over and over and over again the impact that these players have. I mean, I think, the recent example here is Tennessee. You let AJ Brown go, you see the impact that player has on an NFC championship team, and you have to go out and pay Nuke Hopkins now. That's the kind of stuff here. So these players, these wide receivers, it's good to see them get drafted in these high spots. It makes you feel good as a dynasty manager. I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to feel great about it. We haven't had this since the Ja'Marr Chase draft. I mean, even guys like Garrett Wilson and Drake London, which, I loved that class and I love those players. You're talking about bottom of the top 10. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a player that 3, that feels like a floor for him. I mean, we don't know who's picking there yet, but man, the talent alone is just special. And
what 3 would be the ceiling? Because that would be the highest he'd be picked, right?
I think the highest he would be picked would maybe be number 2.
Okay.
What if the Cardinals have both picks?
If they have 1 and 2?
Yeah.
Well, I guess. Yeah.
Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison.
I feel like you'd trade one of them. Is what I feel like would actually.
Or you just take Marvin.
But you could just take Marvin too. That's fair. 3 being the floor feels pretty crazy. But I respect. Yeah. I understand what you're saying.
Okay, top 5 is a floor for this player. Let's say
I love that. Okay,
he is so okay. Let's paint the picture first, because this is interesting. He obviously has Marvin Harrison as his dad, has a pedigree. It's a 4-star recruit, 160th overall in 2021. We've talked about Emeka Egbuka, Malik Nabers, Troy Franklin. These are all guys that were in the 2021 class. Marvin Harrison Jr. was not near any of these guys in terms of his pedigree as a recruit. 24/7 projected him as a day 3 NFL wide receiver with upside to become a day 2 NFL pick. Something happened because that was not real at all. And last year, 77 catches, 1,263 yards, 14 touchdowns. He should have won the Biletnikoff last year. I mean, the Jalen Hyatt Biletnikoff is very very questionable for me. This was your Biletnikoff winner last year. Like you said, I mean, prototypical X receiver with a special blend of route running and catch point skills. I mean, man, in those areas, it is very difficult to find flaws in his game, especially watching how he developed through the season. Because you watch the games early in the season when it was like, JSN goes down in the Notre Dame game, it becomes very apparent that this is going to be the guy in this offense. And I think you saw over the course of the season, he grew into that role and then he excelled in that role. I mean, elite red zone presence. This guy in the red zone is nuts with his footwork and his ability to work the sidelines and go over the top of people. I mean, every time they looked his way in the red zone, it felt like it was a touchdown. I mean, it was nuts. So this is a absolute weapon. I think, like you said, the yards after the catch it's not a part of his game really. And I think part of that is I do think it's worth talking about the fact that, yes, he is a prototypical X player, but 205 is not really the weight that I'm expecting. And he has a very thin frame. It doesn't affect him too much. It's not something that's like, oh man, he better add some mass, but like it's a thin frame. Like you talk about like the prototypes in the history of, the last decade or so in the NFL. It's like Julio Jones, 6'4", 220, get up to that sort of a weight. And you're talking about a player that really can't be touched. That sort of, Julio Jones-esque player. But that is the thing that I point at right now, because there's really nothing else that you can look at with this game. I mean, he's even a good blocker. I mean, insert that Indiana clip where he sprints 40 yards down the field just to pancake somebody on it's like he does everything. He does everything you want out of your wide receiver. And I mean, this just a special player. 3 drops on 117 targets, great hands. I mean, man.
So what I was going to say is I was going to ask you, how many interceptions do you think were thrown on Marvin Harrison targets?
I'll say 1.
You'd be correct. It's 1 interception on 118 targets. So it's going to Marvin or it's going to nobody.
And what's even crazier about that number, he had 30 contested targets.
That's where I was going next.
Like 30 contested targets, 1 pick, 18 catches, 18 contested catches on 30 opportunities. He's insane at the catch point.
So my other question is, do you think they win the Georgia game if he's playing in the fourth quarter? He goes down with a minute left in the third quarter. He's got 5 catches, 106 yards, 2 tuds. It's a close game at that point. It's a close game down to the wire. You think they close it out with Marvin? I mean, Egbuka being your number one's not bad, but having both of them to try to close that game out, CJ Stroud coming back, would be real nice.
It's hard. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. That Georgia team was, they're just
dogs.
The dogs, seriously. But yeah, I think, this season with these 2 guys and, Stroud's gone. We'll see, how the quarterback room looks there this year. I don't expect these guys to lose a step at all.
Kyle McCord, went to high school with Marvin Harrison Jr.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There's your fun fact. Your
That's
Buckeyes
crazy,
trivia. Yeah.
All right.
So might be seeing a renewed connection right
even
here.
more. That would be scary.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else that we need to say about the man, the myth, the legend?
I'm going to do whatever I have to do to see him play in person in Madison. Ohio State plays in Madison this year. And
okay.
I'm getting to that game one way or another.
I'm in. You just tell. I'll give you a blank check. You buy the tickets.
You, me, and Brett are going down to that game.
I'm in.
Okay.
I'm 100% in. All right. Top 5. There's a lot of other guys here to talk about.
I don't want to talk about anybody else.
It's hard to come down from Marvin Harrison Jr. back to your, post 5 guys, but man, there's some talented players in this list. The number one player I want to shout out real quick, just because it was neck and neck for my 5 spot, is a guy that I was excited about last year. And I think he had a really, really good season. And I think he's in for another really, really good season. That's Jacob Cowing. This was a guy that I kind of expected to be in the 2022 class, just because he was a transfer from UTEP or UTS, one of the smaller Texas schools. He came in to Arizona. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you remember, week 1 it was like 150 yards and 3 touchdowns. And it was like, oh yeah, like this is the year he's coming out. It's a slot player, 5'11", 175, little on the smaller side, but he's back. And another Arizona receiver that I'm interested to see if you'll maybe talk about in a bit, Dorian Singer, transferred to USC. So Cowing is kind of, there's a lot of targets that are coming Cowing's way, and he already had over 1,000 yards receiving last year.
I thought you were going to say over 1,000 targets.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he had 122 targets last year.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. I remember some of those games where he was getting targeted a lot.
Yeah, they were feeding him, and this is an exceptional route runner. I mean, it's a lot of short in breaking and then deep stuff, but what he does exceptionally well. And this is a player that has really, really threatening ability with the ball in his hands. Talk about yak. 638 yards after the catch for Jacob Cowing last year. I'm really excited to see what this season holds for him. This will be, he's a little bit on the older side now in terms of this class, but a day 2 sort of a wide receiver that's definitely very exciting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the more consistent guys when it comes to game, just pure stat lines where he's just putting up, what to expect out of him. So I like Cowing. There's not a lot of slot guys in the class that we're going to be paying attention to, so that's going to be a little thin. So if he puts together another season that's similar or better than last year, especially since he is going to be moving up that depth chart or standing alone at the top of that depth chart, I should say, he should be having an even better season. And then he could be rising up, and somebody that needs a body like his, rather than getting maybe one of the bigger guys in this class, could be looking at him a little earlier than we might even expect as of now. So yeah, I like Collin quite a bit. Talk about mine, I guess.
Yeah. Who you got?
Let's talk about the opposite, and let's go with Johnny Wilson. So Johnny Wilson, it's required from Florida State University guidelines to mention that he's 6'7" every time he touches the ball.
Yes.
If you don't, you get executed. It's messy. So every time he touches the ball, you got to say, "Oh, Johnny Wilson, he's 6'7" and he can do things like this." But I mean, honestly, good player. he doesn't look like he's 6'7" because he doesn't move like he's 6'7". He's like very, coordinated. He doesn't really play like a tight end. He plays like a receiver. So does he end up moving in, bulking up? Maybe, because that's what the NFL might require of a guy that's 6'7". You just don't see that kind of body at wide receiver at the next level. So, but he is he's a smooth route runner. I could see him going kind of Evan Ingram route from, that kind of transition where you're listed at tight end, but you're really just a big wide receiver. So he's pretty good at contested catches. He actually plays his size, but he also can win downfield, and he can make some people miss. So it's an interesting player. Another one on this exciting Florida State team that we'll be tuning into. So Trey Benson, your number one running back, and then Jordan Travis, who is also in our quarterback episode. So this is a interesting Seminoles team.
I have no freaking idea what to think about Johnny Wilson right now, man.
Neither do I.
It's a comical player to watch, honestly. Like, he is comically large. Like, you're talking about a guy here in the red zone, like fade routes to Johnny Wilson on a 5'10" corner. I mean, what is that guy supposed to do?
Playing like Syracuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is that guy supposed to do? Like, it's amazing. And I have no idea how to project that. Like, 6'7", you don't really know, like, can he win? Yeah. Got it.
You mentioned it. I was worried for a minute.
Like, can he win as an X receiver in the NFL? I mean, he seems to be like pretty athletic for his size, honestly. Like,
he seems pretty fluid,
almost like shockingly fluid for his size. And so I don't know what that means exactly. Like, I'm hesitant on him just because he's different, and different, is usually like
scary.
Yeah.
No, outliers are outliers for a reason.
Right. So, but yeah, I mean, Florida State, I mean, that's just another reason to tune in and watch this team, watch big Johnny Wilson working down the field. You mentioned,
is that guy 6'7"?
Yeah. I think he's 6'7".
Yeah, you might not hear it on the broadcast, so just know you heard it here first. So that he's 6'7", number 14.
Well, you mentioned Xavier Worthy earlier, and I'm curious what you thought about him. I personally kind of had an expectation that he was going to be in my top 5, and he wasn't. And he wasn't 6, and I don't think he was 7 either. So, what did you think about him?
I was kind of underwhelmed, same here, where I have heard about this name. He was like a Devi guy, and he's really young. I mean, he's only 20 right now, born in 2003. Jesus Christ.
You're right. I know.
What the hell? 6'1", 163. He looks lighter than that.
Yeah.
So he plays smaller than 6'1". He plays every bit of 163. He's a solid route runner, but he just feels like a deep threat is mainly what I took away from it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, what it reminded me of watching him was 2021 Jordan Addison, but like not as proficient, you know, like, and you remember obviously last summer, like I didn't love Addison's Pitt film. Like I didn't love his last year at Pitt, the film there. So Worthy was interesting. And I mean, he is kind of the premier deep threat, I would say, like of this group. Like there weren't a lot of guys that could stretch the field in the way that he could, but yeah, I mean, drops are a huge problem with him. Like,
yeah,
I mean, but honestly though, there were a lot of yards on the table for Worthy last year. I didn't watch the Oklahoma State game when I watched Quinn Ewers before the quarterbacks episode. Wow, was that bad? I mean, I think if I would have seen that, I probably would have bumped him down to number 5, like literally, just from that game alone. It was horrible. And by the end of the game, I think Xavier Worthy was like, I'm done. Like,
yeah.
I can only be open down the field so many times and not get the pass that I'm just done. So,
I mean, 3 catches on 14 targets in that game.
yeah.
And then 2 games later follows it up with 4 catches on 12 targets against TCU.
So
similar experience.
It's yeah, there's a lot of drops, but there was also a lot of Quinn Ewers being not good last year that held him back a little bit. But yeah, he's a player that has a ways to go to get into this conversation seriously this year. I'm not saying he can't do that this year, though. It's certainly a player to keep your eyes on, especially if Ewers can develop in the ways that we are hoping that he can this year.
I really appreciate that you use the 2021 Bolitnikoff winner as a negative for Xavier Worthy.
I'm here all day. You know,
Addison with like 1,400 yards and 12 touchdowns. You're like, he played like him. It sucked.
It just from a projection, I had to come around on Addison anyway, and then I ended up with him as my, number
and
2
now
wide
he's
receiver.
on,
and now he's on my fantasy team. So, let's see. Any other guys on your list that you wanted to touch on?
That's all the people that I thought were important.
Yeah, I mean, I could sit here and
Zachary Franklin names. For Ole Miss is interesting.
Yeah, there's some transfers that are really, intriguing, moving up a little bit. Zachary Franklin was a guy that we kind of had on the program a little bit last year. He's at Ole Miss now. Keon Coleman transferred to Florida State. There's another Florida State guy there. I mean, there's some transfer names to keep your eyes on. Dorian
Does Alabama
Singer.
Have a guy?
What?
Does Alabama have anybody?
There's guys there, but I don't know that any of them are for this conversation yet.
Jermaine Burton and Trayshawn Holden.
Yeah, like Ja'Cory Brooks is a guy that has a huge recruiting pedigree, but we still haven't seen it on the field yet. I
just feel like we haven't mentioned any Alabama guys yet, and
that team's going to be interesting this year.
Right,
this is not really the the Alabama that we're used to. I don't think.
Right. I feel weird not having anybody.
I know. It's very strange. But the only other guy I really wanted to touch on, speaking of transfers, is a guy that I mentioned earlier, which is Dorian Singer. Because this is a player that caught my eyes last year. Very interesting style of a wide receiver. I mean, he's 6'1", 185, but he plays big. Like, the first time I saw him, I thought, he's 6'3", 200 pounds. No, he's 6'1", 185, but he knows how to go up and win the ball. 12 contested catches on 24 opportunities last year. He's got a ridiculous catch reel from last season, and he's transferring to USC. Caleb Williams with Mario Williams and Dorian Singer, that's going to be really fun. And Singer is a player that I think could make a bit of a name for himself. This Arizona team obviously doesn't get a lot of press last year with Cowing and Singer. Now Singer has a chance to kind of move into the spotlight, and I'm really curious to see if he can take his game to the next level and kind of define his role and what he will be at the NFL level if that's in his future. So that was really the only other guy I wanted to touch on. There is one fun one I could bring up.
Maybe USC will just be like Diet Ohio State. Dorian Singer is just like extra zero sugar off-brand Marvin Harrison, and then
like the off-brand tucked into the back of the dollar store version.
It's like you're at the dollar. It's also it's in the white box. It's zero sugar. It's like Faygo Zero version of Dr. Pepper, and then Mario Williams is the same thing as Egbuka. So
cool. There it is.
At least
USC Ohio State college football playoff.
There we go. They're the same team. They're here first.
I'm going to sneak this name in before we sign off. I want to sneak one more name in just because I did a little bit of a moonshot, a half-court shot last week with Carson Steele. I want to do it again. Malachi Corley, wide receiver from Western Kentucky. led all non-drafted players in receiving last year. 1,282 yards. This is the Western Kentucky, crazy passing offense that Bailey Zappi comes out of. Like, we've seen the stats that this offense puts up.
Those Hilltoppers.
But the thing about Corley that's interesting is that he's 5'11", 210. And this guy got recruited. He was like 170 some pounds. So even if they're beefing him up a little bit, he's still put on like 30 pounds since he was brought in. So
I did that too my freshman year.
Yeah, right. So I didn't, it's an interesting build, very dynamic with the ball in his hands, very much gadgety right now. That's why he's not really like amongst this, like we're talking about him seriously at this point, but man, 900 yards after the catch last season, 975 after the catch for Malachi Corley. It was, and that's like 300 more than number 2 in all of college football last year. Like, he lapped the field with the ball in his hand. So he's an electric athlete, slot player with like decent size. I'll be keeping an eye on the Hilltoppers to see what we have with Malachi Corley this year.
I'm watching. I just pulled up his highlights for a quick second to see what's going on here, because I've never heard this name in my life.
It's a lot of screens and
I was gonna say, every highlight starts with him getting the ball 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and ends with him in the end zone. So that's
right.
That's a good sign.
Yeah.
Makes like 8 guys miss along the way too. Yeah.
Get himself drafted.
I mean, he runs strong. Like you said, 5'11", 210 is hell of a frame. Oh my God. All right. Yeah. I'm in.
That's
I'm
for
in.
later. Yeah. All right.
Take this one with me,
It's a testament to this wide receiver group that we could sit here, and we have sat here, honorable mentions. We could go on and on and on. There's a lot of guys here. Very interesting, intriguing, exciting group of wide receivers. And the top end is exceptional, generational perhaps. And even after that, it's very strong. So I think it's shaping up to be a really good class. Why are you giving me that look?
I'm watching Malachi.
It's pretty dirty, isn't it?
This guy, I mean, is he playing against like future athletic trainers? He is. But man, he's making him look pretty fucking dumb. I'm
telling you, just watch out. Watch out for Malachi this year. That's all I'm saying.
Anyway, sorry.
So
should turn this off before things start getting weird.
Right. Next week, we're through quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. You know what that means. It's time to talk about tight ends. Maybe not always the sexiest position, but man, we got one to talk about this year, and I think we might have 2 to talk about this year. But certainly number 1 is, it's right in the same vein as our conversation this week, I'm assuming. So I'm very excited to talk about that player from the UGA.
Yeah, but we got a staple at quarterback. We got a staple at receiver. And we have a staple at tight end. That's just 3 first-round picks.
Might not be a bad class. That's all I'm saying.
So those 3 guys are I generational for Marvin, I would say. Caleb Williams is special.
Yeah.
And our number 1 tight end. Find out next week what we think.
Yeah. And maybe I'll come in and be like, he's tight end too. Or maybe I'll come in and be like, yeah, he's better than Kyle Pitts.
Yep. Oh, I knew the name was going to come up.
It always does. All right. Well, if you liked the discussion this week on wide receivers, head over to our Twitter page at camp_dynasty. Give us a follow there, and camp.dynasty on TikTok. Also check out our YouTube channel. Feeds of the pods are going up. It's getting crazy over there, so make sure you subscribe to that as well. And as always,
be a Marvin Harrison breakout. on that YouTube. I'll call my shot right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely.
Our full Marvin Harrison discussion will be on YouTube.
It'll be there. So check us out there. And as always, like, follow, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast if you enjoyed it, or if you didn't. Feel free to leave us hate reviews as well. We accept those.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we do.
Whatever
Just
have to do.
Leave the 5-star review and then a bad comment.
Yeah. That's all we're asking for, really.
Yeah.
You know, feel free to say whatever you'd like if you leave that 5-star.
It's 2 thumb taps. It's 2 thumb taps.
Come on. Really, real easy.
Yeah.
But enjoyed this conversation, Collin, as always. Wide receiver group going to be very fun. I'm really liking what I'm seeing from this 2024 class as a whole so far. We have 2 whole position groups to get through yet.
Yep. I love Marvin Harrison.
I love Marvin Harrison too. I got a Bijan shirt last year. I think I'm going to end up with a Marvin Harrison shirt by the end of this draft cycle.
What can NIL cook up for us?
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for stopping by Camp Dynasty this week, and we'll see you next week.